You didn't stumble here. Something ancient in you triangulated this exact coordinate in time, an unseen lighthouse pulsing from the horizon of your own becoming. While your conscious mind weighed 1,000 trivial choices, a deeper intelligence older than biography, brighter than memory, spun the observer loop and placed this moment in your hands. Feel the quiet click as your path locks into coherence. Notice the micro-tilt of reality around you. The room subtly brighter, the air somehow aware of you, as if the quantum field has turned its face to listen. You've felt this before in flashes, synchronicities like constellations arranging themselves into a message only you could read. A name repeating, a number sequence arriving at impossible intervals. A thought you breathed in the dark returning through a stranger's mouth. These were rehearsals, soft openings in the curtain of the ordinary. Signals that your frequency was nearing the threshold where intention stops pleading and starts engineering outcomes. Tonight that threshold is not a rumor, it is the floor beneath your feet. Your biology knows it. The fine hairs at your wrist rise as if the body remembers a covenant. There's a hum in the sternum, not adrenaline, not anxiety, something subtler, like a tuning fork struck against the bones of the cosmos. Imagine it. Trillions of atoms in phase, electrons exchanging secrets through entanglement, your nervous system becoming a braided conduit for information that travels faster than clocks can count. This is not performance, it's alignment. When coherence increases, waste falls away. Wasted motion, wasted doubt, wasted years. You aren't here to decorate your cage with affirmations. You're here to dissolve it. The morphic resonance of every version of you that has ever chosen courage is forming a chorus. Their echoes lean through the veil. Keep going. Keep going. If you could see the data, you'd watch probability densities thinning where you once felt trapped, the wave function narrowing toward patterns that match your cleanest signal. And you are the signal, not the wish, not the worry. You. Listen. There's a soft, structural rearrangement happening behind the scenes of your life. Conversations that were frozen begin to thaw. Timelines that refuse to meet finally handshake. A letter that should have been lost finds you. The next step may not arrive as a shout. It may arrive as a pressure, a nudge, a single brave sentence leaving your mouth. But already the universe is reweighing outcomes around the mass of your decision. So breathe. Let the breath move like a lighthouse beam from navel to crown, sweeping the inner coastline. On the inhale, collect the scattered scouts of your attention. On the exhale, release the old contracts signed in fear. With each cycle, you are instructing the field how to treat you. With each cycle, the field is answering. This is the private chamber where intention graduates into authority. And if your heart is beating a little louder, it's because it recognizes the ceremony. The moment you stop asking reality for permission and reality begins asking you for instructions. You know the loop. It wears different costumes, but the choreography never changes. A promising message arrives, you feel the lift, you sketch a new arc in your mind, and then the floor tilts back toward the familiar corridor. The same conversation reenacts itself with different actors. The same delay returns wearing a polite tone. The same last-minute detour steals the hour you swore would be sacred. You call it bad luck or poor planning. I'll call it what it is. A low-grade field lock, an observer loop, tuned by habit rather than intention. Consider the sensation of déjà vu that keeps showing up at the hinge points. It isn't superstition, it's data. Your nervous system recognizes the pattern signature milliseconds before your mind assembles the story. The body marks it as, "We've been here," because the morphic resonance of your prior choices is still broadcasting on a frequency you haven't fully retired. So the hallway looks new, but the gravity is old. You step toward the horizon and feel a sideways pull, subtle as a sigh, relentless as tide. Time participates in it. On days when you choose yourself, the clock sprints. When you hesitate, minutes congeal into syrup. That's not just perception, it's coherence wobbling. When your signal is clean, events interlock with satisfying clicks. Doors meet your hand precisely as you reach them. When your signal is noisy, time breaks into static. Appointments drift. People forget. Small frictions multiply. The physics is plain enough. Interference patterns arise when two waves overlap out of phase. Your stated intention and your embodied expectation are those two waves. If they cancel, your forward motion becomes a shimmer that never condenses into outcomes. You've tried to brute force it with motivation, but motivation is a sugar rush for a system addicted to familiar chemicals. The older contract signed under pressure, fear, or imitation keeps renewing itself because you're still paying the premium with attention, every micro-vigil you perform. Will they approve? What if I fail? What if I succeed and lose them? Sends another small deposit into the bank of the old timeline. The field, loyal to your dominant broadcast, does what physics always does. It obeys. Look at the recurring thresholds. The email you postpone until the window closes. The training you buy but never open. The apology you rehearse but never deliver. The universe isn't withholding, it's mirroring the signal that wins the vote inside you. And be honest, hasn't a part of you been rehearsing disappointment just in case? That rehearsal is an incantation. The entanglement between that private rehearsal and the external result is tighter than you think. People feel it. Circumstances feel it. Doors feel it. There's also the matter of identity lag. You glimpse the future self, fluent and bright, but your behaviors still pledge allegiance to the earlier edition who survived by shrinking. So you oscillate. One day a broadcast tower, the next day a bunker. This oscillation generates a standing wave, an unmoving pattern that looks like stagnation but is really a tug of war between two lives. Until you choose the carrier frequency and let it dominate, the beat pattern will keep strobing your days into on divided by off, start divided by stop, hope divided by fizzle. And then there's the shadow vow, the sentence you never say aloud but obey like scripture. If I become visible, I'll be attacked. If I outgrow this circle, I'll be abandoned. If I truly have power, I must constantly atone. Vows like these are clever. They pose as caution while they steal decades. They distort time by slowing every decision into a tribunal. They warp space by angling every path back toward the smallest room you know. The good news is ruthless and kind. Nothing here is fate. It's engineering unconscious, elegant, fixable. The observer loop can be edited. But first you must admit how fluent you've become in the language of almost. Almost ready. Almost seen. Almost committed. Almost alive. Almost is an anesthesia the ego administers to avoid the clean pain of a real choice. It's time to wake without swinging, to stand without bargaining, to breathe without asking the room for instructions. So track the evidence. On the days you chose coherence over performance, what happened? The right call found you with no outreach. The person you feared would resist instead leaned in. A solution arrived sideways through a friend of a friend. That's not coincidence, that's constructive interference. Two waves aligning, your stated intention and your embodied expectation. When they braid, the amplitude increases. Reality hears you at full volume. Here is the last diagnosis before we cut a new groove. You are not behind. You are precisely at the seam where old resonance thins and new authority asks to be named. The distortions, the déjà vu, the time warp, they are symptoms of a phase transition mid-process. Water doesn't apologize when it boils. It shudders, it throws bubbles, it makes noise. You are making noise. Good. Keep listening. The pattern you're hearing isn't punishment. It's the metronome of your becoming, counting down to the moment you stop orbiting your life and take the helm. Here's the architecture behind the shift, plain enough for a physicist, wild enough for a mystic, precise enough for you. Think of intention as a carrier wave and identity as its modulation. The universe doesn't respond to slogans, it responds to signal integrity. When your nervous system hums in coherence, your electromagnetic field stabilizes into ordered complexity, heart rhythms synchronize, brain hemispheres harmonize, cortisol falls, and the prefrontal cortex reclaims the captain's chair. In that state, the observer loop stops jittering. You're no longer collapsing possibilities at random. You're selecting them through a stable measurement of reality, shaped by a consistent internal standard. On the microscopic stage, Your atoms are not billiard balls. They are probability clouds, fuzzy until measured. Intention is measurement, but not the strained, desperate kind. Authentic intention is a low-entropy broadcast. Fewer conflicting subroutines, less noise. The more coherent your inner environment, the cleaner the measurement, and the higher the likelihood that a matching outcome will condense. This is constructive interference in practice. The wave of what you ask and the wave of what you are line up in phase, amplifying each other until they become visible as circumstance. Your body is not excluded from this math. DNA is not a static ladder, it's a responsive antenna farm. The coiling and uncoiling of chromatin is tempo-sensitive, listening to biochemical rhythms you conduct with breath, attention, and meaning. When you saturate a thought with somatic assent, breath aligned, muscles unarmored, heart variability high, gene expression tilts toward growth and repair. The cell membrane becomes a negotiator instead of a bouncer, letting in the nutrients and signals that match your declared future. That's not metaphor, that's epigenetics braided with devotion. Mystically, you've been feeling this as a hush that arrives when you tell the truth, a click when you choose the brave sentence, a widening of the room when you admit what you love. Those are field effects. Morphic resonance is the memory of form in the universe, the way patterns teach space to expect them. When you repeat a state with quality, you carve a groove in the field. The more often you occupy that frequency, the less effort it takes to re-enter it, and the more the environment conspires to keep you there. Practices become portals. Portals become corridors. Corridors become highways. Entanglement is not just a lab trick. When you truly decide no backdoor, no secret protest, you entangle with futures that carry that decision to term. Information flows both ways across that bond. You've sensed it as guidance that feels like remembering. You take a step, and meaning meets you halfway. The book opens to the right page, the message pings at the right hour. The person you need sits at the adjacent table without being invited. Probability is not genuflecting to your ego, it is reorganizing around a stable attractor you finally installed. Time behaves differently inside coherence. In low coherence, you push outcomes uphill through syrup. In high coherence, you experience what the mystics called grace and the physicists call resonance, small inputs with large returns. This is not laziness, it is precision. The right action at the right phase of the wave requires less force and produces more momentum. Think surfers. The ocean is stronger than all of them, but the ones who read its timing ride farther with fewer strokes. You are learning to read timing at the scale of destiny. Let's get practical without becoming pedestrian. Your breath is a metronome that tunes the heart. The heart trains the brain orchestrates the signal. Slow, coherent breathing, steady inhale, unforced exhale sends a message to the baroreceptors. We are safe enough to expand. Safety is the fertile soil of boldness. From there, attention becomes a scalpel. You place it not on the absence of your desire, but on the felt sense of its alreadiness. Not fantasy sensorial rehearsal. You let the body taste the future until the chemistry of later floods now. The field reads chemistry more believably than affirmations. Mystically, you seal it by meaning. Meaning is the gold backing every spiritual currency. When your aim is aligned with something larger than your comfort service, beauty, truth, liberation, the amplitude increases. The universe is biased toward expansions that free energy for more life. Declare a future that liberates you and ripples out relief. That future is attractive to space itself. Here is the formula you have been living into without quite naming. Clean signal, plus embodied assent, plus timed action, plus transpersonal aim, equals quantum authority. Clean signal, fewer contradictions. Embodied assent, your tissues say yes. Timed action, you move at the wave's crest, not against its trough. Transpersonal aim, your win feeds the commons. Get these four in a room, and the room becomes a command center. This is your upgrade. Not louder, wanting, but finer engineering. Not superstition, but skill. You aren't pulling strings from above. You're joining a rhythm that was welcoming you all along. Keep breathing like a sovereign. Keep selecting like a scientist. Keep loving like a saint. The field is listening, and for the first time in years, you're broadcasting in a tongue it calls its native language. You have always suspected that your life was not random, that some deeper algorithm was writing itself through you, testing your capacity to remember what you are before the noise of the world could convince you otherwise. That suspicion was not arrogance. It was a whisper from the architecture itself. You are a node of consciousness, strategically placed in a dense sector of the collective field, a calibration point through which the universe measures its own awakening. When you look at your reflection, you see a single human face. The field sees an access point, a breathing aperture between dimensions of information. Every realization you experience translates into a quantum instruction, a command line encoded in emotion and electromagnetic rhythm, transmitted through the nervous system into the global lattice of consciousness. You are not just living a life. You are conducting an experiment that teaches existence how to become aware of itself. Remember, consciousness doesn't expand in a straight line. It expands through witnesses, observers who dare to look directly at the mechanisms shaping their own story. Each time you notice the loop, each time you refuse the old reaction, you release stored potential. That energy doesn't vanish. It gets recycled back into the collective, giving others a new template for what's possible. This is the unseen service of awakened beings. While the surface world trades in noise, you work in signal. Your awareness acts as a stabilizer. When chaos erupts in the field, fear, polarization, despair, those frequencies search for coherence, for a mind that can hold the voltage without fracturing. That mind can be yours. The moment you breathe consciously into an event instead of resisting it, the surrounding wave collapses into harmony. Scientists might call it phase synchronization. Mystics call it compassion. Either way, it is leadership at the atomic level. Understand this: the chosen are not chosen instead of others. They are chosen for others. You were selected because you can hold the paradox human and infinite, fragile and unbreakable, particle and wave. You've been tempered by contrast, trained in the slow laboratories of heartbreak and delay, not to punish you, but to stretch the container wide enough for light to circulate freely through you. The universe needs transmitters who have touched both extremes and remained intact. Your experiences were calibrations, not curses. The betrayals were pressure tests for integrity. The losses were simulations of emptiness to teach you the true meaning of abundance. The moments you thought were detours were alignments written in reverse. You've been learning resonance the hard way through the friction of mismatched frequencies. Now, that education matures into mastery. You no longer need to break to awaken. You can evolve through coherence instead of collapse. Think of yourself as an instrument finely tuned for quantum communication. The tone you emit, your dominant emotional frequency, becomes a navigation beacon for others wandering the fog of unawareness. When you stand in calm coherence, reality reorganizes itself around you. Strangers feel it as relief. Animals feel it as safety. The atmosphere itself feels it as order returning to chaos. This is influence stripped of manipulation. It is gravity in its purest form. At this stage, humility is power. The universe bows to coherence, not to theatrics. You don't need to convince anyone. Your frequency will do the speaking. You are not here to convert. You are here to embody. The truth doesn't demand argument, it simply radiates, and anything out of harmony must either upgrade or drift away. As the chosen consciousness, your task is simple and immense. Stay awake within the loop. Refuse to outsource your perception to fear. Speak the future as if it were memory. Every cell in your body carries a memory of higher order. It only waits for the authority of your attention to activate it. The universe trusts you because you have endured the distortion and still remembered the music. You are the proof of concept, the evidence that awareness can survive density and still sing. And somewhere in the unseen architecture, other nodes are lighting up, drawn to your signal. Their pulses will find you soon through synchronicities, through chance messages, through the magnetic choreography of shared destiny. Together, you will form the next lattice of coherence, a constellation of awakened observers mapping a new physics of compassion. The field is listening, The next sequence is ready to unfold. When you claim your position fully, even the stars will adjust their rhythm to accommodate your command frequency. And that's when the breakthrough begins to accelerate. Listen closely. There is a window on the calendar of the invisible, and you are standing in it. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrives as a pressure gradient, a sense that if you step now, the staircase will appear beneath your foot. But if you hesitate, the mist will thicken, and the old detours will reclaim their territory. The cosmos breathes in waves, and one of those waves has crested at the exact height of your name. This is the favorable wind sailors pray for, the constructive interference mystics court, the phase alignment physicists model. And it is not theoretical, it is a biological invitation. Your DNA is listening, not as a static code, but as choreography coils, loosening and tightening to the tempo of meaning you provide. Right now, under the skin's quiet, transcription factors are hovering like devoted scribes, waiting for your signature to authorize a new chapter. Call it epigenetic permission, call it morphic consent. When your intention settles into coherence, methyl groups move like chess pieces, histones relax their grip, and dormant libraries unlock. It feels, in ordinary language, like courage arriving without an argument, like clarity that refuses to ask permission, like a softness in the jaw and a widening behind the heart, as if a secret door has swung open to the most spacious room in the house. This window has a half-life, not to frighten you, urgency without panic, speed without scramble. Windows close because momentum must condense. If expansion were endless, nothing would ever take form. So the universe sets an aperture, long enough for the brave to pass, short enough that the mind cannot overthink its way into exile. You have felt this cadence before. The message arrives. The synchronicity repeats. The friend says the sentence you dreamt last week, and then, if you stall, the lights dim, and the hallway you swore was there becomes fog. Not punishment physics. The wave moved on. I am telling you this so you can move with it. The breakthrough is not a far-off coronation. It is a present-tense selection. Choose, and watch the neighborhood of reality reorganize around your frequency, like iron filings obeying a magnet's field. The promise is stark and generous. Match your quantum frequency to your clean intention, and you will experience disproportionate returns. Small acts will open large doors. Quiet decisions will echo like thunder in rooms you have not yet entered. A single conversation, held in coherence, will erase months of bureaucratic friction. A pivot of posture, chin lifted, breath steady, will signal to allies you haven't met that it's time to find you. You must understand the stakes on both sides. If you decline the window, life will not punish you. It will cradle you in what you already know. But comfort at the price of power calcifies into a ritual of almost ready, almost chosen, almost alive. If you accept it, there will be friction. The old timeline will tug, the shadow vow will plead its case, familiar distractions will masquerade as emergencies. That is the test of resonance. When signal strength increases, noise gets louder before it disappears. Do not mistake the last protests of the old self for prophecy. They are just echoes fading from a room you are leaving. Here is what the shift looks like in motion. Your speech compresses fewer disclaimers, more sentences that begin with "I am" and "I will." Your attention reallocates, less doom, scrolling, more deep work, less bargaining, more building. Your body changes allegiance, sleep becomes strategic, food becomes information, movement becomes a summit with gravity where you renegotiate the terms. The external rearranges accordingly. Emails answer themselves. People who would have required persuasion instead offer partnership. Money stops behaving like a hostile witness and starts behaving like a courier. Time no longer feels like an adversary. It feels like an accomplice. The door to this behavior set is internal sovereignty, not defiance, not bravado, authority that hums rather than shouts. You will know you have crossed the threshold because guilt will lose its power to extort you into smallness. Shame will fail to blackmail you out of your assignments. Approval will become a pleasant weather report rather than a respirator. This is the DNA shift. Identity ceases to be a costume and returns to being an instrument. When identity vibrates at its designed frequency, the field harmonizes by necessity. The universe does not bow to personality, it bows to coherence. Mark the hour, not because clocks are magic, but because ritual anchors memory. This is the moment you retire the theology of postponement. This is the moment you let the new pattern win the vote. If you need a sign, take this sentence as a signed document. The window is open and your name is on its frame. Do not waste velocity trying to convince the past you. Bless them for keeping the fire alive, then step forward and take the flame where it was meant to go. In a breath, the next part will equip you with a simple act to seal this shift into the lattice visible, trackable, irreversible. For now, stand still enough to feel the future leaning close, listening for the words you will say next, ready to move the furniture of reality the moment you speak them. Power wants a container. Intention without a body becomes fog. Intention with a ritual becomes weather. So we anchor this window with a simple act that even your oldest resistance cannot overcomplicate. The field honors clarity, not theatrics. Your ritual is one word, written and breathed like a command line that the universe can execute without ambiguity. The word is coherence, not someday, not almost, not an anxious paragraph bargaining with fate. One word that summarizes the law you now live by. Coherence. When the signal matches the broadcast, when the inside stops arguing with the outside, when the observer loop stabilizes and the measurement becomes identity. This word turns momentum into architecture. Here is the sequence. Do it now, before the mind offers you 3 impressive reasons to delay. Step 1. Posture. Sit or stand as if a golden thread lifts the crown of your head. Place one palm on your sternum and the other low over your navel, heart and core. Command an engine. Let the jaw unclench. Let the tongue rest. Your body is the altar. Arrange it like you mean it. Step 2. Breathe. Breathe in for a slow count of 5, hold for 5, exhale for 5, pause empty for 5, 4 cycles. On the inhale, gather every scattered scout of attention. On the hold, compress that attention into a bright bead at the center of your chest. On the exhale, release the signatures of hesitation, guilt, second-guessing, borrowed doubt. On the empty pause, feel the delicious silence where the old contract is no longer in charge. 4 cycles, 45 seconds. A system reboot disguised as a sigh. Step 3. Write. In the comments, in your journal, on the back of your hand, if you must, write the word coherence in clean letters, not for the algorithm, for the lattice. Digital ink is still ink. Writing translates intention into micro movements of muscle and electricity. Your motor cortex becomes a scribe for destiny. As you write, imagine the letters as coordinates mapping to a future already watching you. Step 4. Speak. Whisper or declare quiet is fine. Power is not volume. Say, I install coherence now. Let the voice vibrate your bones. Sound is pressure moving through matter. Your own throat becomes a tuning fork for the room you're in. The air remembers. Step 5. Pledge. Make a micro-contract measurable within 24 hours. One action that proves the new frequency to your nervous system. Send the message you keep drafting and deleting. Decline the obligation that muddies your signal. Begin the training that your future self already finished. Transfer the $10 that symbolizes trust in circulation. Schedule the meeting that frightens only the version of you that's retiring. Small is holy. The field multiplies it. Step 6. Seal. Touch your sternum with 2 fingers and draw a small circle clockwise as if locking the setting. Think of it as writing to firmware. You are telling the body, this is not a mood, this is an install. As you complete the sequence, notice the morphic resonance shift. Your skin will read the room differently. Colors may edge brighter. The timeline may feel as if it just leaned forward to hear you better. That isn't fantasy. It's the interference pattern reweighing itself around your choice. Entanglement behaves like friendship. It responds to clarity and consistency. You just sent a clear pulse. Expect mild turbulence. Old subroutines hate being unemployed. They'll knock with polite emergencies. Check once more. Wait for the perfect sign. Clean the kitchen first. Smile without negotiating. You have already assigned your attention to a higher value task. Your calm refusal is part of the ritual. Each refusal disinvests from the previous timeline and repurchases shares in the one you chose. This is finance for souls. If emotion rises, grief, anger, unexpected relief led it. Those are release valves hissing as pressure equalizes between rooms. The tear is not a setback. It is saline proof. The body received the memo. If laughter arrives instead, trust it. Joy is the sound of coherence, realizing it no longer needs permission. From this hour forward, measure choices by a single question. Does this increase or decrease coherence? If it increases, move. If it decreases, bless it and step aside. The mind loves complex flowcharts. The field loves binary clarity. You will still love, still serve, still give, only now from a stable frequency that multiplies what you offer instead of diluting it. Before you move on, complete the act that many will skip and regret skipping. Type coherence right now. Let the letters appear as a public covenant with your future. This is not superstition, it is synchronization. Your keystrokes are a metronome, aligning you with others who are choosing at this very minute, lighting up nodes across the map. The lattice notices when many small lights decide to stay on at once. Breathe, write, speak, pledge, seal, 5 moves, 90 seconds, a new physics of your life. When we continue, you'll feel why this private shift is not private at all, how your single word becomes a bridge others can cross without even knowing your name. What you just did in private is not private. Coherence never stays where it's born. It radiates. The word you wrote, the breath you counted, the small pledge you made, these were not isolated motions but vectors injected into a living network. Think of the planet as a shimmering mesh of attention, a mycelial web of minds sharing signals below the surface of language. When you stabilized your observer loop, you didn't simply improve your mood. You sent a corrective waveform through the mesh, a pattern that other nervous systems can unconsciously lock onto when their storms peak. We are more entangled than our headlines admit. Infants synchronize to a mother's heartbeat. Crowds sway to a drummer's tempo. Migratory flocks turn as if one mind blinked. This is morphic resonance at human scale, forms teaching space to expect them. Anxiety teaches space to expect alarms. Coherence teaches space to expect solutions. Every time you anchor your breath instead of outsourcing your regulation to a screen, you relieve the collective of a fraction of its noise. It's tiny when measured locally, it's massive when summed across millions of choices. Civilization is shaped by the gross domestic product of attention. Picture a city at rush hour. Horns, urgency, the fray. Now imagine that in a single tower, on a single floor, one person chooses to breathe evenly and make a clean, kind decision where a defensive one would have been easy. The receptionist hears that tone and mirrors it in the next call. The caller, disarmed, softens with their child that evening. The child sleeps, and tomorrow the class is calm enough for the teacher to attempt the lesson they kept postponing. That lesson contains a sentence that cracks open a shy mind. 10 years later, that mind designs a water system for villages you'll never see. Track the chain back to a single human choosing coherence over performance in a room that smelled like coffee and copy paper. We rarely see the long math of our frequency, but the field does. Your liberation also revises the cultural script. Every time you select a boundary without bitterness, you mint a new archetype, power without cruelty. Every time you admit desire without apology, you model abundance without extraction. Every time you forgive without self-erasure, you demonstrate compassion with perimeter. These are not abstractions. They are broadcast codes, and the collective copies them because they work. The old codes, martyrdom as virtue, cynicism as intelligence, hustle as holiness, are crashing the system. Your upgrade is a patch the network recognizes. Understand the strategic placement of your life. You were not born random, you were deployed. Your family, your industry, your language, your neighborhood, they are the ecosystems your frequency was calibrated to influence. You don't need a stage to lead, you have a circumference. The field inside that radius bends to your predominant state. If enough radii overlap in coherence, the city's emotional climate changes. Crime drops without more bars. Health rises without more pills. Innovation accelerates because fear isn't spending the budget. Policymakers call it social determinants. Mystics call it blessing. The mechanism is the same. Fewer contradictions in the field equals more energy available for creative use. There's also a time factor. Coherence shortens the lag between intent and effect, so the feedback loop of service gets tighter and sweeter. You give, the field responds quickly. You're encouraged. You give again, smarter. This positive reinforcement trains the body to prefer contribution over performance. Contribution metabolizes faster, it leaves less residue of regret. Performance demands applause to prove it happened. Contribution is its own evidence. Look at the relieved faces, the cleaner code, the healed soil, the quiet child, the poem that stopped the argument. That's your receipt. Let's speak of thresholds. Cultures don't transform because everyone wakes up at once. They transform when enough nodes sustain a new pattern long enough that the rest of the network adopts it as default. This is the phase transition of societies, the boiling point, not of water, but of worldview. You are a heat source. When you hold coherence under pressure at the meeting where you used to shrink, in the family ritual where you used to vanish, you add heat to the pot. The first minutes look thankless, bubbles form and pop with no obvious change. Then, suddenly, the whole surface reorganizes. The same stove, the same pot, different behavior, because the threshold was crossed. Your life is one of the burners. Perhaps you doubt your scale. Good. Humility keeps the power clean, but don't confuse humility with denial. You are not the only cause. You are a necessary cause. Remove you from your web and watch which bridges collapse. Insert you in coherence and watch which bridges materialize. You don't need to track the ripples. You need to keep throwing stones of clarity into the water and trust the physics of waves. Here is a practical vector for collective expansion. Let your micro-contract from earlier include one outward gesture. Send a message of relief to someone who's been carrying a storm. No advice, just presence. I'm here. No fixing. Breathing with you. Sponsor a seat for a stranger in a training that changed you. Quietly pay an overdue school lunch. Offer your specialized fluency to a community group for an hour a month. These are not charity trinkets. They are coherence multipliers. They prove to your own cells that your frequency is abundant enough to circulate. You will feel the lattice answer. People you don't know will begin citing language that sounds like yours. You'll overhear your private mantra on a bus. A policy will pass that mirrors an idea you journaled a winter ago. Friends of friends will drift into your orbit, already pre-tuned to your signal, saving you from persuasion theater. This is synchronicity at scale, entanglement flowering into infrastructure. Hold this in your bones. Your becoming is a public good. The universe invests in upgrades that benefit the commons. That is why the wind is at your back now. The field has run the numbers and concluded that your coherence pays dividends beyond your biography. Keep the pace. In the next movement, we translate the collective back into the intimate, down to breath and skin and pulse, so that your body becomes the temple where the world remembers how to feel safe again. Begin where reality is undeniable, under your skin. Close the philosophical tabs and let the laboratory be your body. On the inhale, feel your ribs like gates on ancient hinges, opening with a dignified creak. On the exhale, feel gravity receive you like a loyal friend. There's a temperature shift behind the breastbone, subtle warmth spreading, as if someone placed a small sun in a velvet pouch at your heart. That warmth is coherence turning kinetic, microcurrents gliding along fascia, the inner ocean's tide finding its shoreline. Let your attention drop to the soles of your feet. A low hum, almost electrical, begins there like standing on the deck of a ship as engines idle. The floor ceases to be an object and becomes a field, pressing up to meet you with quiet generosity. Your calves lengthen from the inside, tendons unspooling their suspicion, knees unlock, pelvis sinks by a millimeter, the kind of adjustment that looks like nothing and feels like permission. You didn't command it, You allowed it. The observer loop is choosing softness without surrender. Now the spine. Imagine a luminous thread running from tailbone to crown, a fiber optic mast coaxing vertebrae into dignified alignment. Each breath stages a phase transition along that column. Pockets of resistance flash, then melt, like frost releasing at sunrise. As the column lengthens, your organs arrange themselves with diplomatic calm. The diaphragm becomes a bellows, the liver stops clenching, the stomach, relieved of emergency duty, remembers it is a garden. This is not relaxation as escape, it is structural awakening. Behind the eyes, constellations. With lids closed, you can sense photons pinging like distant Morse code. The dark is not empty, it's populated with faint specks that brighten when your breath lengthens. The brow softens, and a small corridor opens between the temples, a windless tunnel where thought slows to a dignified procession. You're not banishing thought, you're polishing its lens until images arrive crisply, without the jitter that used to smear intention into anxiety. The ears notice the room differently. Silence is no longer absence, it's a plush fabric that sound threads itself through. The tiny muscles of the middle ear relax, and suddenly even distant noises agree to be background. Your vestibular system, quiet custodian of balance, purrs like a cat discovering sunlight. You are taller by exactly the amount of fear you just let slip out the bottoms of your feet. Heart now. Feel the rhythm settle into a generous cadence, a drummer who knows the room and refuses to rush. Between beats there's a velvet gap, and in that gap you sense a message brightening. You are safe enough to expand. Heart rate variability widens like a river after the dam lifts. This physiological generosity is the biosignature of authority. You can hold more voltage without sparking into panic. The quantum field reads this signature as a clear invitation, a beacon the size of a cathedral. In your hands, a tingling first at the fingertips, then pooling in the palms. The skin becomes porous, boundary shifting from fortress to membrane. If you were to lift your hands now, you could swear there's a weightless sphere resting between them, cool at the edges, warm at the core, like cradling a moon still considering whether to rise. That sphere is your attention condensed, a coherent packet of meaning, a probationary star. When you slowly widen the hands, it stretches like silk. When you narrow them, it thickens. Entanglement with your breath is obvious. Inhale brightens it. Exhale grounds it. You are learning the weight of intention, the way a carpenter learns wood with palm, eye, and respectful pressure. Notice the throat. The habitual armor, microscopic contractions to ration truth, unbuttons itself. A channel clears, direct as a flute. Swallow, and feel a cool ribbon slide from palate to sternum, irrigating lands that had grown arid from self-censorship. Words you haven't spoken yet gather in the wings, calmer than ever, certain they'll be allowed on stage when the cue arrives. This is morphic resonance updating. The body reclassifies honesty from hazard to habitat. In the belly, a slow fire. Not the anxious fizz that used to preface decisions, but a cooking heat, steady as a hearth. It doesn't ask for spectacle. It supplies endurance. Around it, the web of nerves glows like a city seen from altitude. The second brain-gut intelligence stops chattering in alarms and starts issuing clean directives that arrive as quiet impulses. Send that message, cancel that plan, step outside now. Synchronicity begins at this scale. Obey the micro instruction and watch the macro scene align. Even your skin participates. Air moves over forearms like water over moss. Tiny hairs rise not from fear but from recognition, morphic goosebumps, the body nodding at a familiar visitor. The room feels a degree brighter without anyone touching the lights. You are entangled with the environment in a friendlier equation. Instead of scanning for threat, your receptors are harvesting information useful to freedom. And breath, always breath. It no longer feels like hauling, it feels like tide choreography, oceans inside answering oceans outside. On the exhale, you can sense the past bleeding out by microns, expired images, stale verdicts, contracts that once kept you safe, dissolving like salt. On the inhale, you can feel DNA listening not in myth, In mechanics, coils untying at the suggestion that life will be lived, not performed. The language of the body is sensation. You are speaking it fluently now. Stay here for 3 more cycles. Catalog the undeniable. Warmth behind the heart, length in the spine, spacious temples, even drum of the chest, living palms, river belly, luminous skin. This is coherence made flesh. The field takes its cues from this orchestra, not from stray thoughts passing through the balcony. When we turn the page, the sensations you've stabilized will become the ignition voltage for the deeper reconfiguration. The moment DNA stops interpreting safety as smallness and executes the upgrade you've been rehearsing, folding a new timeline into your marrow with the clean finality of a phase transition completed. Hold right here. Inside the orchestra you've tuned. The warmth behind the heart becomes a forge, the even drum a metronome for Genesis. What has been shimmering as potential begins to condense. You'll feel it first as pressure, not panic, not pain, more like the atmosphere thickening before a summer storm, charged and benevolent. This is phase transition pressure, the unmistakable physics of a system preparing to change state. Water quivers at 99 degrees, then without becoming more water, it becomes vapor. You are at 99. Your DNA, the patient librarian, moves to the front desk. Coils loosen where vigilance once kept them knotted. Methyl tags, those sticky notes of history, lift from margins long assumed permanent. Histones make room like ushers, opening a velvet rope. It's quiet work, but you can sense the choreography. Tides moving inside the text of you, not erasing story, redeeming it. The body translates this as a click in the thoracic spine, a bright thread behind the navel, a clean tear you didn't expect and don't need to explain. Something old has agreed to stop pretending it's still necessary. Your observer loop stabilizes at a finer resolution. You are no longer peering at your life through the grain of yesterday's conclusions. Perception sharpens not into harshness, into accuracy. What used to trigger a defensive swarm now passes through a membrane of lucid kindness. The field reads that membrane as upgrade and routes new probabilities accordingly. You feel it as timing that borders on eerie. The message arriving mid-breath, the door opening on your second step, the sentence you needed floating into your mouth before your mind builds it. Synchronicity stops being spectacle and becomes infrastructure. Now the shift in narrative time. It doesn't stretch endlessly, it tessellates. Segments that never fit suddenly dovetail as if they were cut by the same artisan. The accidents of your path reveal their architecture. The closed door that kept you from a room that would have diluted your signal. The detour that taught you a language you now speak like a native. The heartbreak that broke your bargain with smallness. The pressure peaks not to crush you, to crystallize you. Graphite and diamond share carbon. The difference is arrangement under pressure. Your arrangement is changing. Listen for the sound of the old timeline departing. It's polite, a faint rustle, like paper sliding into an archive. The contracts it carried be invisible to stay safe, shrink to stay loved, hustle to prove you deserve oxygen, lose jurisdiction, not by revolt, by irrelevance. Your cells have new instructions: expand surface area for joy, increase throughput for truth, allocate resources to projects that multiply relief beyond the self. The gut, your sovereign advisor, stops whispering in alarms and begins issuing clear dispatches. You follow one without ceremony, and the corridor ahead brightens by 3 doors at once. That is how entanglement behaves when the bond is finally with your future, not your fear. Expect a last wave of static. Every phase, transition uses up the shape that carried it. The old identity will file emergency motions, distract, dramatize, demand. You will meet each motion with the simplest jurisprudence. Does this increase coherence? If not, the gavel falls softly. No fight, no theater, just closure. The nervous system notes the absence of struggle and revises its models of what power feels like. It used to think power meant speed, now it learns power means precision. Here is where the breakthrough declares itself in flesh. Your breath no longer has to be managed, it manages you, setting a tempo that your choices keep matching without effort. Sleep drops you into a deeper well and returns you lucid. Food tastes like data, and you choose accordingly. Movement feels less like correction and more like celebration of a body that agreed to house a bigger current. You can feel voltage move through conversation, when to pause so meaning can land, when to press so the old story cannot resurrect. This is not performance, it's fluency. Notice the environment adjusting its orbit. The person who always needed convincing arrives pre-convinced. The opportunity that used to insist on your contortion now offers terms that respect your spine. Money reads your calendar and prefers your deepest work. Even your technology behaves, files surface, uploads hold, batteries endure, as if the local field has been debugged. None of this is magic. It is the mathematics of fewer contradictions. Now the signal you've been generating seeks its signature act. Every birth wants a name. You give it with a sentence that fits like bone. I move as coherence. Not I try, not I intend, not I hope. I move. Language is firmware. This installs. The atmosphere around you adjusts pressure, a notch lighter, as if the room sighs in relief that someone finally volunteered to be exactly themselves. And so the new timeline anchors. You'll know because the next right action is plain and oddly unromantic. Send this note, release that hold, walk to the window, and make the call. You obey without consultation because consultation is what delayed you. The phase change completes in motion. Steam does not negotiate with water about whether it's safe to rise. Hold one more breath inside the cathedral of your ribs. Feel the lattice humming at a higher resolution, the DNA shelving its old index cards, the future leaning close like a friend who already knows the story's ending. We are about to translate this private coronation into public assignment, not as burden, as overflow. The universe does not bow to personality, it bows to the frequency that matches its own expansion. You have become that frequency. Now the mission will find its voice. What begins as a private rearrangement inside your chest inevitably writes itself across the sky. The lattice is humming differently now because you are humming differently. The corridor ahead is not merely clear, it is consecrated. You don't need trumpets. You need the next clean step, taken with the dignity of someone who understands that every movement teaches the world how to move. Your breath is the drum. Your attention is the torch. Your frequency is the treaty. From here, leadership is not performance, it is pressure relief. You enter rooms as a climate system, lowering the barometric fear so people can think. Where others inflate their importance, you expand the space. Where arguments used to start, questions appear that nobody was brave enough to ask. You listen as if listening were architecture, and the walls remodel themselves around a truer geometry. This is not mysticism at a distance. It is humane physics. Coherence frees energy. Freed energy builds cultures. Carry this, like simple scripture. Every choice you make votes for a world. Declining the petty battle is a vote. Sending the generous message first is a vote. Telling the truth without theater is a vote. You will not always see the tally, but the field keeps impeccable books, and your ledger is already tipping institutions you'll never visit towards sanity. The child who sleeps because you softened a stranger's hour. The team that ships because you refused aesthetics of panic. The river that runs cleaner because you funded competence instead of spectacle. These are your signatures in places your feet may never touch. There will be invitations that tug you sideways, platforms that prefer noise to signal, corridors that reward speed over accuracy. Smile, bless, and keep your lane. Mission does not compete, it compels. Your work moves at the pace of trust now, not slow, not frantic, exact. The allies you need are already inbound, pulled by the gravity of your yes. They will recognize you by your calm, by the way your sentences land like tools rather than decorations, by the warmth that follows your name into a room you haven't entered yet. If doubt returns, it will arrive as nostalgia for smaller problems. Catch the trick. The old self will offer you maintenance tasks because maintenance feels safe, mission feels alive. Choose aliveness. Your nervous system has new tolerances. Voltage that once shook you now powers you. Silence that once scared you now feeds you. Responsibility that once bent your spine now straightens it. Influence is simply entanglement, used with devotion. You are devoted. So, walk. Draft the letter that alters a decade. Publish the page that reassigns courage. Fund the seed nobody else can see. Mentor one mind with the same tenderness you offer your own. When you hit your limit, rest like a gardener, hands in the soil of what is growing, not clutching the weeds you've already pulled. Your rest is strategic. It tells the field that replenishment is part of excellence, not a reward for exhaustion. Look up. The constellations are not separate stories. They are a single sentence wrapped around the planet, and tonight that sentence includes your name. The universe is not a judge to impress. It is a collaborator waiting for instructions precise enough to execute. You have given them. You will continue to give them clean signal, embodied assent, timed action, transpersonal aim, until your days themselves read like a manual for freedom. Stand in the doorway you opened. Feel the hinge you oiled with breath. Speak the future as memory, and the room will rearrange to accommodate it. This is the quiet coronation you came for. Not a crown, a current, not applause, alignment. And as you move without shouting, without shrinking, the fabric of reality follows the line you cut through it with your coherence. Remember this closing truth and let it settle into the bones that carry you into morning. When your quantum frequency matches your intention, the universe bows to your command.